My name is Joseph Burke. I am an independent filmmaker from Newport, Rhode Island, and I was doing a film. There was a murder mystery ghost story called Exchequer out of a place called Benton Point here in Newport. And during this particular filming that I was doing for this murder mystery ghost story, I decided to do some establishment shots at a particular location out at Benton Point. When I developed the establishment shots, most of the shots came out normal, but one of the shots came out very, very unusual, and it had a, what I thought would be kind of like a paranormal mist or a paranormal kind of a setting. So I became very entranced with this particular photograph that I had taken out at this location, Benton Point, and I decided to do some investigations with it, and I came in contact with a number of different paranormal organizations in the Newport area, and this led me to a local cable paranormal TV show that was directed by the gentleman sitting next to me here, Jesse Correa. And after doing the show, doing the interview, Jesse and I had a conversation, and I found out that Jesse was in the process of writing a book about Benton Point, and he had done 25 years of research on this particular area here. So we put two and two together, Jesse and I, and we said, boy, probably really neat in conjunction to you developing the book to come out with a documentary movie. So basically what we decided to do was we decided to come out with the first of a series of historical investigations, and the first of these investigations is called The History of Brenton Point. Well, I wanted to introduce Jesse Correa, who was my creative partner in this project here, the documentary, The History of Brenton Point. And first, Jesse, you did 25 years of research. What attracted you to this particular situation?
I had been familiar with it probably from childhood. Probably the oldest photo of myself is an area just off of the actual, it's at Benton Point, but off of the main carriage house and stable, and where we've done most of the investigation. A little wall exists where the property ended, and with me, my mother, and my grandmother, and I'm in a crib. It is an old black and white photo from the late 50s, early 60s. And my father was drawn to it. I used to go there a lot, especially during like fog or thunder, high winds, big storms. He would actually get us in the car, and we'd drive from Somerset to Benton Point to watch the waves crashing on the shore, or the dramatic lightning or something, just to, because it was just, and it kind of stuck in my head. It's just an amazing spot for these great, it was beautiful. The displays of nature were wonderful, and it had a piece to it.
So you went in there, but that calling there, very fascinating, very interesting.
It eventually
led to investigation of
within time. I actually, I'd asked my father, and he told me about a house being there, and I couldn't even see where the house would have been.
Right.
And obviously I had been to it when I was younger.
You're talking about the reefs now, right?
Yeah. The reef.
Yeah.
And of course I was an infant, so I wouldn't have memory. But eventually I said, well, I'm going to go dig into this, So I went to the Newport Historical Society. And it started real simple, real basic, which was just digging out all the things on the house, which, as you said, I discovered was named the Reef. Mm-hmm. No longer exists. It had burned down in '62 due to homeless people, supposedly, that were occupying it. It had been in disrepair. The owner, T.M. Davis, they had some articles on him. It was a very light read on the subject, and seemed to satisfy me initially at the time, because it answered a lot of questions about what had been there. Mm-hmm. And I found the one fact I found amazing is the fact that this Davis was actually an Egyptologist who had discovered Again, I can say it Nakatan, but I'm not really sure if that's the proper pronunciation because I'm not an Egyptologist. But I hope I'm saying it right for anybody who is. But he's the pharaoh in Egypt who united everything under one god, Ra, the sun god, and set up his own capital city, and just changed the entirety of Egyptian history. Nefertiti and King Tut, that was his son, and after his passing, they destroyed all records of his reign. It's the only time in Egyptian history it had been done. All writings on the walls were uncarved. The city was destroyed. They moved it back. They brought back the multi-god system. So I found that this seemed to be a pretty important fact in Egyptian history, because I had never heard of it. And to destroy the actual history of one of their pharaohs is unheard of, because they were the gods that walked on earth according to them. Mm-hmm. So I didn't understand why Newport didn't monopolize on this, having the residents of this individual in their town, but they never really monopolize on it. That would lead to me doing a lot more research, because I eventually would. It became something that can never be finished.
Right. You went real deep though. Like, for example,
Yeah.
how far back did you go as far as research goes, or?
With the research,
Yeah.
over the course of years, I went back to the ancient times, back to 12, 13 hundreds or before BC. There's statements from Indian chiefs, or sachems, as they be called in this area, that said that this area was visited by the Phoenicians at one point, which is, I guess, a bit of an unprecedented statement. Mm-hmm. Since
Beats that guy that came here in 1492 a little bit, right?
Predates it by a long time.
Yeah.
The Vikings, of course, had visited the Native American tribes here. Mm-hmm. And of course the proof, there's no real proof. So what is being said is based on historical piecing together of things they found. Mm-hmm. The Dighton Rock with the runes on it. Fall River, Massachusetts had a skeleton once, and it was actually in a suit of Viking armor. It was destroyed sometime in the 60s or 70s in a fire. But it was a Viking. So, and of course we have the tower in Newport. Architecturally, it just reflects the time. So I can surmise at best, there had to be some type of Viking occupation here at some point in time. Mm-hmm. And again, in the 1400s, the Portuguese explorer who were
Standing here by the tree of investigation here, and of course this is sacred territory that was occupied by the Indian tribes thousands of years ago. But I'd just like to read a little bit here about Verrazano's account of the Narragansett Indians. Verrazano, when he first explored this particular area, how he described the Narragansett Indians. And here's what he said. We found a passing good haven, wherein being entered, we found about 20 small boats of the people, which were divers. Cries and wanderings came about our ship, coming no nearer than 50 paces toward us. They stayed at a distance, an artificial of our ship, our shape and apparel, that they all made a loud shout together, declaring that rejoiced when we had something animated. Then, using the gestures, they came so near, so that we cast them certain bells and glasses and many toys, which when they had received, they looked on them, and laughing came without fear aboard our ship. There were amongst these people 2 kings, so godly in stature and shape, as is possible to declare. The eldest was about 40 years of age, the second was around 20 years old. Their apparel was on this manner: the elder had upon his naked body hot skins, wrought artificial with divers branches, like damask. His head was bare with the hair tied up behind the diver's knots. Above his neck, he had a large chain garnished in diver stones and sun-dried colors. The young man was his apparel was about the same in manner. This is the goodliest of people in the fairest conditions, and we have found in our voyage. They exceed us in bigness. They are of the color of brass, some more than others, some more white than others, some yellow in color, and commonly vicious with long black hair, which they were very careful to trim and deck up. They are black and quick-eyed. The women are of comfort and beauty, very handsome and well-favored. They are the well-mannered and continuate of any women of good education. And this pretty much describes the Indians at that particular time there. Friendliness and their hospitality toward the early settlers tends to give proof that settlers came here from Europe prior to Verrazano's voyage here.
In the 1400s, you had a world filled of Indians here. This would have been their culture. You would have Narragansett, the Wampanoag. There was something called the Massachusetts tribe, some type of name. And there's other tribes that have very limited mention, that probably have gone extinct. These tribes all lived in coercion with each other, sharing the land, the plenty, just a society. They weren't so much at war with each other, as we're led to believe by colonial statements. Now this is their world. Now here comes a ship across the ocean. They have canoes. A large ship comes with white sails, and here come these white people who are no color like theirs off the boats onto the shore, speaking another language with them. That would be the equivalent for us of a UFO landing in the middle of town and an alien, a green alien, coming out and speaking to us another language. It's not something you reach out and you greet the person with and you make comfortable, that you invite into your culture, unless you have had some kind of contact with them historically before that's documented within your culture, so that it's not so much of a surprise. This spot, though not registered as a haunted spot, has had a long history with unknown phenomenon, sounds, and cult activity. Originally, this spot was occupied by the royal tribes of the here 5 years away, and then it would switch to the opposite tribe, be it Narragansett and Wampanoag, and they would do the same and switch back. They would stay in this area during the summer and then move further towards where Newport was in the winter, where their winter lodges would be permanent. The Viking colonization or attempted colonization of the colonies would have taken place in 1121 or so. It would have been by an Eric Gudeman. Many theorize that Cape Cod is where he found New Vineyard, and his maps do indicate that he came through up and around Newfoundland, Iceland, across through Canada, down by New England to Cape Cod, and perhaps even further south before sailing back, following all the coastlines. He certainly would have stopped in at Brenton Point, since that was predominantly a tribe area, as is recorded by the Indians. And another small but interesting discovery that a friend of mine has made in a cemetery that is an exact replica of the Newport Tower. Now the Templars came through New England, and they probably built this. The architecture matches perfectly. The arches, the construction on the arches, even the window. But what is the importance of that? Out in Fall River, Massachusetts, and other artifacts at Westford, Mass. Night, the various rune stones that have been dug up and found in the area of Maine and Massachusetts and other areas in New England have Narragansett rock, Dighton rock, all which seem to relate to a Viking presence or a Templar presence. This area, and part of its tragedy with the Indians, is with the arrival of the white man, both the Vikings and the Europeans, the Indian population was wiped out by the smallpox virus. Smallpox, which is really just wiped out today and we don't have it, is a very terrible and horrible disease. And with white cysts, and it's a terrible disease that incapacitates, causes great pain, and takes away all of your self-worth, and it takes a great deal of time to die. The Indian culture had a great deal of respect for their people. They wouldn't segregate them. So what would happen? They would try to cure them, and just coughing or breathing will transfer the disease. So entire tribes would become ill. There would be huge amounts of people laying out, just suffering, unable to move, covered in sores, screaming, and towards the end, in the smallpox disease, a bit of insanity sets in, because you're not able to do anything, your body's falling apart, no one's able to help you, and if your tribe is infected, everyone else has it also, and all your loved ones have it, and a natural insanity will set in. This is a brief history of William Brenton, for whom Brenton Point is named after, whom our documentary is based on the history of. William Brenton was born to a prominent family in 1610 in Hammersmith, England. He lived to the year 1674 and was in England when he passed also. But in the 1630s, he came to the Boston colony. The preceding events, quite simply put, had been the founding fathers of the Newport colony had been part of the main colony in Rhode Island, with, Providence under Roger Williams. But the Puritan faith, if you look at it in its punishments and the way it treats its people and the way things are done, is a very strict faith. It's a very difficult faith to be part of. So they had founded their own variation, which became a Baptist faith. Now the First Baptist Church in Providence was established, but the Baptist faith was not really what you would call it. Wasn't really taken in by Mr. Williams and the other Puritans. So William Coddington, William Brenton, Annie Hitchinson, Nicholas Easton, John Clark, and a few others went off in search of their own colony, a place where they could live and practice their own faith, their freedom of faith in the new world. They came upon and found the island of Aquidneck, as they called it. The Indians also called it Aquidneck, and they found it just to be a great place and favorable and weather-wise and everything. And the Indians seemed very friendly, so they colonized that area, splitting into two sections. The upper section going to Annie Hitchinson, and she called it was the Middletown colony, and the Newport colony, which was founded by Coddington, Brenton, Easton, and Clark. In the 1600s, at that time, the Wampanoag were occupying this land, and they were in semi-agreement with the English, as a student of history with the King Philip's War would know. And some chose to be what was called a praying tribe, which was a Christianized tribe, and coexisted with the colonization and the colonies. There was a colony here at one point, a very small colony, farming, a church, a barn, and other very limited small colony here. And these particular Indian family coexisted with the people who lived here. Well, the non-praying Indians who were following King Philip didn't agree with this, and so they drew the family out. Where the quarters would have been exactly at that time, there is no exact layout for the compound. And on this tree, they hung the family. It was a husband, a wife, and a child, to show as a example not to agree with the colonists and to follow their rule and to side with Philip. Hold it right there. Jabel also did very well in the colonies, obviously. During when the Revolution came, and Rambo came through and drove the British out. They were briefly driven out. Rambo writes about celebrating with the Narragansett tribes down in Benton Point area, the lower peninsula of Newport, where he attended celebration with dancing and festivities and food and such. He left, and when he left, the British fleet returned to Newport, and the French fleet, basically without him, fled to pursue the British forces that they were actually fighting. And joined George Washington's colonial army. They held Newport then until the end of the Revolutionary War, where, of course, they took all their records and a lot of the names we wish we had, and locations of tribes, and the older maps the Indians had that they had mapped out of the territories, loaded it all on a ship, and they all fled the colonies at that time, because it was no longer under British rule. It's kind of a shame, since the Indian map supposedly not only would have had the village locations, but also would have had the Newport Tower on them, according to legend. That's all they really had on them, besides the territories and the mapping out of the area. So we might have seen where things were, as William Brenton had found. The only record at this point of anything on the land at that time is an essay by his wife on the horticulture of the area. And it's a fascinating report, but it doesn't seem to go much into human habitation or the Newport Tower. There have been two families that have lived here since the tribes have since passed. This land was owned by Jabez Brenton. Brenton owned a great deal of Newport. Brenton's Point, this whole peninsula where all the mansions are named after him. After the land was subdivided and the Brenton estate was broken up, and this became the social ground of the rich, this area of land stayed highly unoccupied except for a few farms through the 18th century.
The Reef is a large estate in Newport at the end of the point at Brenton's Reef. In the 1600s, a man bought the land and built a home for his mistress. She was, among other things, a seer. Shortly after living there, the man was driven mad and died. Although she inherited the home, she developed a strange affliction that drew her head back further and further until she too died. I believe legend has it that the house burned down shortly after her death. Many years later, T.M. Davis, a brilliant lawyer, bought the place and, against the advice of his many friends who lived nearby, had a very beautiful new house built on the original foundation. He and Mrs. Davis, who was thoroughly sweet and charming, went there to live. They were a devoted and happy couple. He was a connoisseur of art and had a splendid collection of old masters. He was also a famous Egyptologist, and the winters were spent on a dahabeah on the Nile. One summer, Mrs. Davis invited an impecunious distant relative for a visit. This woman, Emma Andrews, immediately had her husband incarcerated as insane and continued her visit. Within 2 years, Mrs. Davis was ousted from the premises. She went to live with her nephew, Terry Beale, in Washington, an allotment of $300 per month and nothing more. Mr. Davis had several millions. After Mrs. Davis' eviction, Mrs. Andrews accompanied him everywhere. In time, Mr. Davis was wholly under her domination. Having spent much of my early childhood in and out of the then happy place, all this was horrible.